Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History. As always, we are your hosts. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Jacob.
And let's see. This is episode number 8 for the week of September 20-something through September 20-something.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so it's been going on here. We had our little special super episode last week with the Missing the Mark guys.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to have 2 extra people to talk about something we like talking about with.
Yeah, it was nice that we had a lot of good back and forth there. They had a lot of good different opinions from ours. They weren't like completely crazy opinions by any means, but they were different enough from the two of us that
especially to keep a conversation going about something, as that can be as narrow as wrestling.
Yeah, and it was nice that they can get as off topic as we can sometimes. So it was nice that we kind of went off in some interesting directions there.
Yeah, it was fun. I look forward to doing it again. I'm sure it'll be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, definitely. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, I definitely think you should check that out. It's available both from our site and from the Missing the Mark guys. They have it up on their site as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of thanks to Jamie and Steve over there. Anything else before we kind of get into things this week?
Not that I can think of. Nothing major has happened in this week more recently. So.
Yeah, nothing kind of turned the wrestling world on its head or anything. Well, Brie Bella situation.
With her double botches and then concussing Liv Morgan.
Yeah, I've been seeing some stuff out there on the internet from professionals and non-professionals, and as expected, a bit of a differing of opinion between the pros and the armchair people. The armchair people kind of calling for Brie's head and her retirement, and the pros saying it's kind of part of the business. If it becomes a pattern, there's a problem, but...
I mean, to me, it's already become a pattern because at first she was botching stuff that only could hurt herself. Now she's botching things that can hurt other people.
But it's still just one. It's kind of still in the realm of fluke, I guess. I don't necessarily know if I fully agree with that viewpoint. I get it.
I'll be a little bit more upset if it happens again.
Yeah, if it starts happening often, then we definitely have a problem here.
If she starts dropping concussions on every single woman on the SmackDown or Raw roster, then I think it will be an issue.
Certainly. In case anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, recently this past Monday on Raw, Brie Bella was doing kind of the Daniel Bryan yes kicks on Liv Morgan, and some people said she kicked her in the face. I don't even think it was a kick. I think she just accidentally straight up just kneed her in the face twice in a row.
Yeah, her first kick went too high, and her knee caught Morgan square on the nose. And then as Liv started to kind of slump forward, Brie threw another one that should have been at the correct height, but because Liv Morgan was
going forward,
cracked her on the face again, and she slumped over, and Brie tried to pin her. She kicked out.
Immediately went for the pin, which is kind of common in wrestling. When a legitimate mistake happens, you kind of see them go for a pin immediately just to kind of give themselves a few seconds to kind of recover. And
the part that got me, though, is afterwards, Liv kicks out of the pin very poorly, and Brie tries to stand her up, and Liv just falls flat on her face again. And then she gets rolled out and taken to the back.
Yeah, so unfortunate situation there because apparently she does have a concussion from it.
Yes, and from what everybody's saying is out for the near future.
Yeah, that's super unfortunate, especially with concussion stuff, because family members of mine have concussions. You've had concussions.
Yeah.
They come with lasting issues. It's not just a nasty bump on the noggin. All right, let it heal up for a few days and I'm back. It's long term. It can have major problems.
Yeah, if they keep stacking up, your memory will start to go on you like mine has already.
Yeah, and that's almost best case scenario is memory problems, if not emotional problems and just random pain problems. So anyways, hopefully she recovers fully from that. Hopefully it's just a one-off thing. They take her out, let her heal up and not pile them on top of each other.
Yeah,
which is,
let's hope she's back for either the Super Show in Australia or the Evolution is coming up this month, isn't it?
Yep. October.
October.
Yep. We're close to October, but not quite there yet. All right. Anyways, on to the main part of the show here today. We have a little bit of a recap here. It's going to be another one of our single episode shows where we're going to be covering In Your House number 10.
Ugh, number 10.
Yep. In Your House 10, Mind Games.
Back when they only had the big 4 pay-per-views.
Yep. So, all right. Let's duck away for a second and we'll get into this.
Hey guys, this is Jamie,
And this is Steve-O.
and we are the hosts of Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast.
Hashtag your new favorite wrestling podcast.
We are a wrestling podcast for wrestling fans by wrestling fans.
And you can find us anywhere you can find your podcast, so check us on out.
Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a brand new episode from us, anywhere from WWE pay-per-view coverage, what's going on in the state of professional wrestling, as well as interviews with superstars such as former WWE superstar Colin Delaney.
And the review shows can get a little bit heated sometimes, but it's all in good fun. And we want you to join in on the fun.
So please subscribe, listen, download. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at @MissingTheMark_, as well as on Facebook, Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast. And I don't think you'll regret it.
The most must-listen-to wrestling podcast out there.
All right. Thank you guys for checking us out, and we'll see you down the road.
September 22nd, 1996.
All right, so this week we're going over In Your House number 10, Mind Games from September 22nd, 1996. As we're saying, this show comes from back in the days when there was only the big 4 pay-per-views normally named, being Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. This was early on when they first started doing the monthly pay-per-views. I don't believe they were even fully monthly at this point.
No, they were almost bi-monthly.
Yeah,
They were very sporadic.
It was closer that they went with the big 4, and then in between each one there was an In Your House, so
Yeah.
up to like 8 a year.
Yeah.
So
Big difference from the 12 to 16 that we get this year now.
right. So yeah, what they used to do is you'd have way back in the 80s and early 90s, you just have your big 4 pay-per-views per year. Then mid to late 90s, they started adding these In Your House events, and they're all called In Your House something. So really kind of the early days of the pay-per-views being their big shows and carrying all of their storylines. Before that, it was just like your big blow-offs on your pay-per-views, and your feuds carried weekly through Raw and Superstars.
Yeah. It was kind of starting around the time where the Attitude Era was starting to pick up,
Right. So we're pre-Attitude Era, but not by much.
but very, very close to it.
Right. We're kind of done with the characters, but we don't yet have the edginess of the Attitude Era characters.
This was shortly after the infamous Stone Cold or Austin 316 promo.
So yeah, Austin 316 promo was King of the Ring earlier in 1996. King of the Ring was actually its own pay-per-view, so yeah, so that was kind of like the 5th one that got added unofficially, and then
It kind of disappeared for a little bit. It came back and disappeared, so
maybe one of these days we'll do a show just on King of the Ring itself and kind of the history of the
and as a concept
tournament.
itself,
Yeah, exactly, on the history of the concept. Anyways, so yeah, so in 96, we had a couple big events leading up to this whole thing. First off, before even Austin 316 at the King of the Ring was the event that caused Austin to win at King of the Ring, which was the Curtain Call, was actually in 1996.
That's right.
Yep. So the Curtain Call was the MSG show where Kevin Nash and Scott Hall left WWE, and Triple H and Shawn Michaels celebrated with them in the ring after the show.
They had the whole click thing going on, and
Yep. And people did not take too kindly to the business being exposed like that, and Hunter ended up in the doghouse.
that was one of the first big breaking of kayfabe moments.
That pretty much was the number one of it happening.
And yeah, Hunter ending up in the doghouse. Go figure. During this, he ends up in a dark match against Jake Roberts.
Yeah.
And lost.
Yep, he was definitely in the doghouse at this point in time. All right, so actually onto the show itself. Another weird thing about the In Your House pay-per-views, especially coming from the modern day where we have 6-hour long WrestleManias.
It was less than 2 hours.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour show. It's shorter than Raw.
Yeah. If you look at the timer, if you're watching it on WWE Network, if you look at the timer,
It's an hour 55.
Yeah. Which is absurd now when on a Sunday when I go to sit down to watch a pay-per-view, I have to dedicate 4 hours to watching.
Yeah, about to say you're sitting down at 7 and it's not done until just about 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a different feel to today's pay-per-views if you go back and watch this.
Now, granted, the first match that they have on there was not the first match of the card.
Right. So
They
had more dark matches than pay-per-views normally have.
They had 4 matches beforehand, which one of them kind of comes into... 2 of them actually kind of come into play later. One being for the first match with Savio Vega winning against Marty Jannetty.
Yeah, they kind of set up the first match of the pay-per-view with the last match of the undercard.
Yeah, and earlier in the night, Psycho Sid defeated Vader, who ends up showing up. They both end up showing up
At the main event.
during the main event.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So good segue there into our first match of the show, which was Justin Hawk Bradshaw versus Savio Vega
In a Caribbean strap match.
Yes, the Caribbean strap match, aka a dog collar match, aka
A
leather strap match. Yeah, basically the two guys are hooked together by the wrist with a big 8-foot leather strap.
Yeah, just about.
And how you win this is you have to touch all 4 corners of the ring sequentially without your progress being interrupted. Is
in like a major fashion.
It's there's no good definition of what that actually consists of.
No. Kind of funny enough that Harvey Whippleman is the special guest referee, but they make really hardly any note of it.
Oh yeah, he was just kind of being done with his stint as being the annoying little scrawny nerdy manager guy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's JBL back in his original gimmick.
This is long before APA.
Oh yeah, way before. He looks a bit doughier than normal, which is saying something.
Yeah, I mean, in this gimmick, he's just a big old Texan boy.
And it's weird because he's kind of almost like fat, scrawny.
Yeah, he's not like when he was in the APA. Dude was big.
Yeah, like he's a little doughy. His arms aren't very well defined. I mean, his arms are big, but they're not like wrestler big.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, compared to me, he could bench press a Buick, but
right. At one point in this match, and it's kind of interesting to watch, off in the corner at one point, you see Paul Heyman.
Yes.
You
And
see Tommy Dreamer.
one Thomas Dreamer, yes.
And
Tommy.
And Sandman was there.
Yep. So this was the start, and I guess it's kind of a real good show that the indicator that the Attitude Era was on its way here. This started the actual feud between ECW and WWF.
Yeah, it was quite something seeing Savio Vega and JBL toss a couple of fan beers at Tommy Dreamer and Sandman, and the two of them get riled up, and Paul Heyman trying to stop them.
I mean, many years later, we can look back and see, yes, obviously these guys are in the front row. They're interacting. Security's not diving on these guys. Something's up.
Right.
But back in the day, they don't really even announce it. Like, they don't really say anything during the commentary of the match.
They were just saying a couple of things about unruly guys who were invited here by WWF, and now they're being pushed out.
Yep. So, yeah, they had some of the top ECW guys in the front row, and they, didn't really interfere in the match, but caused a little bit of a ruckus, got in everyone's face, and had an incident.
And all the fans that are nearby are all standing with their heads looking towards them instead of at JBL and Savio Vega.
And that's kind of what started the real crossover in the Hammerstein Ballroom between ECW and WWF, where we had Rob Van Dam showing up, jumping off Rob Van Dam and Sabu showing up. Sabu jumped off the top of like the WWF logo there, and just it's really what made a kind of real start to the Attitude Era and some of the more,
because they had to start keeping up with ECW, which was a lot edgier than what they were putting out.
Yep, and ECW needed some help paying the bills in secret, so Paul was taking a couple checks from Vince every now and then.
Yep.
And in exchange, they traded some talent back and forth, like Leaf Cassidy, that would be on the undercard. Leaf Cassidy being Al Snow before he went on to become Al Snow, and it was just this awful 70s gimmick. But anyways, I forgot there was another thing that after this match in the back with Savio Vega, you see him just laying on the ground, and you see kind of like some boots run off just out of camera shot.
And those boots are attached to some kind of tassels that might look a little like Diesel's.
Yeah, and there was
Ring
another set
attire.
of boots that were purple and
With a little bit of yellow and a vest.
gold. Yeah, so this was also the start of the fake Diesel and fake Razor Ramon things. That's a whole nother thing I'm sure we'll get into another time. I don't know if it's worth going into right this moment.
No, because that's all that really happens with it, and it disappears afterwards.
Yeah, they really existed for about 3 months. JR was tied into it for literally 2 weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
Not good stuff.
They
but-
beat up Savio Vega, and before the cameraman can get over to him to see who it is, you hear somebody yell, "That's Diesel and Razor," and then they disappear behind a door that conveniently locks behind them.
Yeah, and this was during the time that I guess we'll get into it for a minute here. This was during the time that the NWO had just started. Hall and Nash are firmly WCW guys at this point.
They've been WCW guys for quite some time.
Yeah, at least since the middle of the summer when the NWO first debuted.
Yeah.
So, kind of the reasoning behind that was WWF actually had a lawsuit against WCW, claiming Scott Hall was doing too much of the Razor Ramon thing, and that Razor Ramon was a character owned, and that they could just put another performer into that role.
Yeah, because he was still coming around with the toothpick and flicking it at people and still using the Razor
pseudo
talk.
Caribbean accent. Yeah, and then they put Rick Bogner and why can't I think of Kane's name?
Glenn Jacobs.
Glenn Jacobs, yeah. Glenn Jacobs being fake Razor before he was Kane.
And fake Diesel.
And he was fake Diesel before he was Kane, sorry. And Rick Bogner being fake Razor, and he was actually a really big guy in Canada and Japan,
Yeah.
but never really made a splash over here.
Didn't do much.
I think the fake gimmick really hurt.
It was in a career that was kind of tapering off at this point. This was the final nail.
Yeah, the gimmick didn't do him any favors whatsoever.
Yeah.
All right. Next up was the ever so enthralling match between Jose Lothario and James Cornette.
Honestly, I skipped this match. I didn't watch it because as soon as Jim Cornette comes out in a Under Armour version of his suit that looks like he's also wearing a diaper, nope.
Well, I watched this match, and that's one whole minute of my life I will never get back.
Yeah, because it was less
was
than
nothing.
what?
It was nothing. It was a dumb match, and Cornette gets punched in the face once, goes down, and that's about the entire match.
Which, I mean, I guess for a couple of managers that makes sense.
So actually, I remember back in the day, so it was Jose Lothario first showed up when HBK was training for his Iron Man match at WrestleMania with Brett, and it was like, this was the guy that trained him originally, and so now he's going to train him for this big championship match. And he seemed like, back in the day, I didn't know who he was. Last week, I went up and actually looked up on Wikipedia who this guy was. He holds the record for the longest losing streak in the NWA at like 500 matches.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess he was a glorified jobber in the NWA way back in like the 60s and 70s, and then opened up a wrestling school and trained HBK.
Yeah. Yeah, he once had a losing streak of over 500 matches. He had some pretty decent feuds. Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch.
Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, HBK kind of got into it with Jim Cornette's camp over the summer of 1996, and kind of the partial blow off to that whole thing was Cornette and Jose Lothario having a match here at In Your House.
Yeah, it not good.
It was less than a minute. It was serviceable. It was basically a break.
Yeah. So after that, then we had Brian Pillman come out,
Yeah, a little promo time.
which is interesting in the middle of a pay-per-view.
Yeah, you don't normally have that in a pay-per-view anymore where we're just going to like, all right, we're going to have an interview segment in the ring.
Right. Unless it's something like, the highlight reel or something that's
Well,
gonna.
Not even that really.
Jericho had it a couple of times.
A couple times, but
but
not very often.
It would almost immediately lead into a match after that.
Right, and this didn't.
So Pillman comes out and starts talking about how Bret Hart isn't there. He said he would be there to kind of show up and be Mr. Tough Guy Bret Hart, but lo and behold, he's not here because he's on the quote-unquote, what was it, South African tour or
I think
something?
it was Saudi Arabia or something.
Yeah,
so not in the continent.
So Pillman brings out Owen Hart and asks Owen, why is Bret not here? Is he afraid of me? Is he afraid of you? Like, what's going on? And Owen Hart goes, no, it's not either of us, and it's not, Shawn or any of the other main event guys. It's this guy.
And then out comes Stone Cold Steve Austin, but not to the glass break.
Nope, his music was awful.
Yeah, this was, I think it was still the old Ringmaster music.
It almost sounded like Ministry of Darkness Undertaker.
Yeah, it was just kind of generic bad guy music. So we've already had the Austin 316 promo, but we still don't really have full-blown Stone Cold Steve Austin. We still have bad guy Stone Cold.
And bad guy Stone Cold wasn't bad.
No. Honestly, bad guy Stone Cold is the exact same character as
It's true.
crazy money-making Stone Cold of the late Attitude Era.
It's just
who it's focused at.
Right. And this time it happens to be focused at one of the top baby faces in the company at the time.
Right. Their interview segment was fine. I don't think there was anything too revolutionary there. But
No, you just get more of a feel of Stone Cold as a talker, aside from the Austin 316 promo.
Yeah, it was a little bit more antagonistic than he normally was, and it was just a little bit different from his normal Stone Cold promos, but still really solid stuff.
Yeah, good way if you're just kind of watching to kind of get the feel for it.
Yeah, and again though, I think the most notable thing was just the fact that random interview segment in the middle of the card.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that Austin used and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so line like 4 times in this promo.
Yeah, well, sometimes when you got something, you go to that well a whole lot.
Yeah. All right, so after this, Owen Hart doesn't actually come back. He leaves, but comes
Owen
back
leaves,
out
then he
almost
comes
immediately.
back with his tag team partner, British Bulldog.
Yep.
And they're facing the tag team champions, the Smoking Guns.
Bart and Billy Gunn.
Yeah.
Billy Gunn would also later be known as
Mr. Ass.
Yeah.
Boy, was this a weird time in wrestling. The Smoking Guns were like 5-time tag champs.
Yeah, crazy. And they were literally essentially Bradshaw's character from earlier in the night, just more of a cowboy.
Yeah, they were just, right. Bradshaw was mean, gruff, angry cowboy. The Smoking Guns were kind of like smiling, happy rodeo cowboy.
Yeah.
Like they were so generic babyface though.
It's kind of funny. I made a comment to you about this as I was watching it, that the Guns come out with Sonny, who Sonny was super heel manager at the time.
Right. So they were kind of in the middle of an angle where I think Sonny was going for Billy Gunn.
Yep.
And
Bart was getting upset about
yes,
it.
Bart was like, oh, she's distracting you from us winning the tag belts. We're supposed to be the tag team guys.
Right. And it's funny because they're getting cheered, or they're getting booed like they're heels throughout most of the match. Yet the heels, Owen Hart and British Bulldog, are getting cheered out of the building.
Yeah, so the thing to remember was this pay-per-view was in Philly, home of ECW.
Yeah.
So the crowd was a little bit smarter and a little bit more antagonistic than your average WWF crowd of the day.
That I guess that makes more sense, but it was funny because it might have been one of the earlier instances of let's cheer the bad guys and let's boo the faces that we don't like anymore.
Well, I think that's a lot to do with like Philly and the ECW influence there is just because at this point in time, people wanted something different. They didn't want the white meat baby face of just smiling good guy, happy to be here, just going to try my hardest and do what's right.
Right.
They wanted something with a little edge.
They gave up on the take your vitamins
Yeah.
super baby face.
And the NWO was a thing now, and the NWO was cool. We don't want good. We want cool.
Right. And hence why Stone Cold starts to become a big thing after this.
Right. He's definitely on the way to getting kind of the rocket strap and
Yep.
going off and running because it's the WrestleMania following this that the double turn with him and Brett happens.
Yeah. So back to the tag team match.
Yes.
The Owen Hart and the British Bulldog actually end up winning and getting the tag belts. And Sonny goes crazy after the match and I paid you guys. I did this. I gave you money. I gave you myself. And yet here we are. You're not champions. And Billy's falling all over her. And Bart's like, eh.
Yeah, so soon after this, maybe not soon, about a year after this event is when we'd get the original DX. And then about a year after that is when we would get like kind of the most famous version of DX, the one with X-Pac and the New Age Outlaws.
Yeah.
Which Billy would go on to be part of.
So we get a title switch, and people are all excited about Owen Hart and the British Bulldog having the titles now, and nobody really cares about the Guns and Sonny.
Yep. As I recall, it was an angle that really went nowhere.
Yeah. It wrapped up relatively quick.
Yeah, oddly enough, Smoking Guns, no one cared about them. They didn't have a real personality. No one really cared. And
yet,
all right, they broke up. Cool, whatever.
If they had different characters, I'm sure they would, because, I mean, both of them were decent workers. I mean, especially Bart, maybe not so much.
Bart wasn't great. He eventually went on to be in the Brawl for All and infamously.
We'll get to that, I'm sure, at some point.
I'm certain we'll get to that at some point.
But Billy was always really good. I for a bigger guy, he moved really good, and
people don't realize how big Billy Gunn really is.
Yeah, standing next to Bart Gunn, who's a mountain of a man himself.
Right, and British Bulldog, and Owen wasn't exactly small himself. He was the smallest guy out there and the most agile, but he still wasn't small by today's standards.
Yeah, I mean, even if you were to go now, you put Billy next to any of the original DX people, he's gonna be the biggest one.
Definitely.
He's bigger than Triple H.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's about Drew Mac's size, isn't he?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Right around Drew McIntyre size, I think, is pretty accurate. So, I mean, it was a decent enough match. Got the titles off the people that needed to get the titles off of them.
Yeah. I mean, so looking it up real quick, Billy's 6'5", 265. That's
a decently sized guy.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, that is definitely not small.
Okay, so after this, we have Mark Henry.
Yeah, Mark Henry versus Jerry the King Lawler.
In Mark Henry's very first WWF match.
Right, so that's kind of the thing to note of this. Not a good match by anyone's real standards, but, I mean, for seeing this guy in his very first outing, it wasn't awful.
No, and I mean, it started a Hall of Fame of a career.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing to note was just how good was Jerry Lawler as being a heel in the 90s.
Just from watching this, detested Jerry the King Lawler.
In the 90s, I absolutely hated him. He was so good at his job.
Yeah, he knew how to get under people's skin. And he knew how to. It was that laugh. It was that.
He had that cackle.
Yeah, that every time you heard it, you'd wanted to just reach through the screen and smack him. Yeah, and say
like those awful old school comedian one-liners that you're just like, oh, just shut up. Yep. You're just the worst.
So it's kind of funny to see Mark Henry and Jerry Lawler kind of go at it. And Henry ends up winning by submission. It's a short match.
Yeah,
compared
it's
to
5 minutes.
everything else.
It was like the world's worst backbreaker.
Oh yeah, it was not a good match.
Yeah, so all right, that's Mark Henry versus the King, and like I said, for what it was, the guy's first match in the company, Jerry Lawler obviously carried it through everything, but it's a pretty good guy to get thrown in against your first match.
Right. It could have been a lot worse. He could have had Savio Vega for his very first time out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, put him in there with a veteran that knows how to heal it up, make this guy just look like $1 million, and gets the job done. I mean, obviously, with the length of Henry's career, he did something right.
And the multiple different title reigns he had. So
Yeah. So good for him.
next up was a pretty decent one. It was Undertaker versus Goldust with Marlena.
Yeah, in
And
a final curtain match, which just meant pinfall or submission only.
Yeah, or I mean, I guess there was a thing where they could have rolled him into the casket at the side, but nothing.
No, the
really-
casket wasn't even out right now.
It didn't come out at the beginning.
Nope, didn't come out.
Yeah,
They came out later.
Must have skipped forward too far.
So this was a really good match, I thought, for the time, and between these two guys,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Goldust is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated wrestlers of the 90s.
definitely, and I still think it's a crime the guy never got a world title reign at some point in some company.
Right. I'm sure if he ever ends up leaving WWE, I could see him, if it comes back up, him versus Cody for the NWA title, which would be,
That would be weird.
it
but
would be
yeah,
amazing.
it would. Wow, what a weird thing.
It would be amazing. It would be same move sets, but I would want to see the natural.
Dustin Rhodes. Yeah,
Yes, I want to
instead
see
of
the
Goldust, yeah.
natural against the American Nightmare.
That-
I think that would be a real cool.
That could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right, I won't lie. That sounds like it'd be neat. Anyways, back to the actual match that did happen. So I thought Undertaker sold his ass off more than I've ever really seen Undertaker sell.
So to me, because when did you took a hiatus from
Yeah,
watching
I
wrestling?
took a hiatus like right around the time the PG era started.
So probably around what 2000 and
5, 6,
up until probably
Well,
2013,
right before
14?
the Nexus showed up.
Okay. So that's right around peak Undertaker on SmackDown with the World Heavyweight title.
Yes.
Taker used to sell for people a lot better then
Mm-hmm.
than he had during like his time in the Ministry and against Shawn and prior to this match.
Right. So this was still during the days of him having with Paul Bearer and the Urn, and him kind of doing the no selling every freaking thing under the sun times. So
Right. And from what I'm used to, because that's kind of my heyday of wrestling, he seemed like normal Taker to me.
Gotcha. So I guess in the context of what I'm used to, this was a little bit different. So I thought it really showed that he definitely respected Dustin and
Oh, absolutely.
definitely put over his offense.
Absolutely. Because even during the times where I'm talking, the only times that Taker went through and sold like this was against, funny enough, against Edge,
Mm-hmm.
against, he had a couple of matches with Mark Henry, because at the time he was like the mainstay of SmackDown. He didn't really sell that much for like Mr. Kennedy when they had their matches.
Right. To get Taker to sell for you, you better bring it and you better be doing a good job.
Right.
Yeah, he better like you, or you better make him like you. Kind of bit of an old school mentality, but
You gotta
stern
earn,
but fair. Is
you
I guess
gotta-
what I would say.
you gotta earn the respect, but I'm not gonna hold it from you.
Right. I'm not going to be a jerk, but if you don't make it happen, I'm not just going to hand it to you.
Right. Now, on the other hand, you have a guy like Goldust who has done it all and had very good matches with just about everybody he's been in the ring with.
Right. And this was kind of near the end of the first reign of Goldust, I believe. He was kind of going out a little bit, but to get a good feud going with Taker was definitely notable.
Yeah, I mean, especially around this time when Taker was usually at the top of the card.
Right. So it was a little bit before the Hell in a Cell with Mankind, but he was definitely starting to put on the more aggressive styles of matches that they had.
Yeah.
So this was post Boiler Room Brawl with Mankind at the previous SummerSlam right before this.
Yep, and it was just before his, I believe, second title reign for the WWF title.
Yes, sounds about right.
But overall, good match. I wouldn't say it's a match that you should go out and seek,
Yeah.
but if it comes across on like YouTube or something,
Sure. Yeah, it's not going to really ever make like a top 10 Undertaker matches, but
right?
it was a
good.
solid little match, especially for this time period, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Overall, I thought it was one of the better ones of the card.
Yeah, so, all right, that brings us up to our main event of the evening, which was the WWF champion, Shawn Michaels, versus Mankind.
And Shawn Michaels came out with Lothario again.
Yep, Jose Lothario, and Mankind came out with Paul Bearer.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny because you had the Mankind pining after the urn, like
yeah,
Taker
so
was.
Taker and Mankind had a feud leading up to this that they were still basically in the middle of this feud, as we would come to find. But the big thing that had happened right before this, again at SummerSlam, was they had the Undertaker versus Mankind in the Boiler Room Brawl, and at the end of that match, we saw Paul Bearer turn on the Undertaker, crack him with the urn, and turn heel and become Mankind's manager.
Yeah, and they had a couple of funny little nods to it where, like on the back of Mankind's like shirt that he wore, you kind of got the Taker like X cross thing almost.
No, that had been on his shirt since he started. That was just some weird Mankind.
He had like the almost the Egyptian thing on the back for a little bit, but the X's that they had on there, they very clearly took those and
from
used them.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I guess I didn't notice that.
Yeah,
Now I learned something.
It was kind of cool to see. But the Mankind promos, I forgot how good overall Mick Foley was.
Mick Foley was so good at connecting with the audience on a really deep, guttural, emotional level.
Yeah, like, so going back and watching this, my prior experience to Mick Foley, because I hadn't been watching around this time, because in 1996 I was 5 years old.
Shut up.
Was more of the time where Randy Orton and Mankind, where Randy's in the middle of the Legend Killer thing. Edge versus Mick Foley, where he puts Foley through the flaming table.
So more when Foley was actually kind of quote-unquote retired and just kind of doing these little one-off matches.
Yeah, and then on the flip side where Foley ends up in Impact with TNA at the time, and he's kind of in and out of being retired there. So that was my more recent, or my only exposure to Foley, aside from being tossed off of the cell, which literally everybody who has seen any small amount of wrestling knows about.
Right. So Mankind originally came in the WWF and was a really weird gimmick. And it eventually really went places as like this very basic level thing that kind of is inside of everyone was kind of, I guess, what they were going for. And they were pretty successful with it, really. And everyone kind of hated the character because you almost had to acknowledge that, there's kind of something like that that's inside of me, that it's like that anger, angsty, just not nice part of people that kind of lives deep inside somewhere.
Yeah, and it came about at a really good time, because this was when, like we were saying earlier, the super baby faces were starting to fade out, and the take your vitamins and get to bed early kind of thing was ending, and it was a lot edgier than what had been out prior.
And it brought people into the stories more, because not am I just watching big good guy versus big bad guy. I'm watching someone that I can actually now start. I don't just like them. I'm kind of relating to this.
Mm-hmm.
And now with Mankind, I don't like how I relate to this.
Right.
Because it's reminding me of something that is kind of inside of me. And I don't like that being inside of me.
Right. And then on the flip side of things, we have Shawn Michaels.
And Shawn's kind of at the pinnacle of his pretty boy phase.
where the women love him.
Women love him. Guys are getting tired of this.
Like, yeah, we get it. You're a good-looking guy. You're doing all of this stuff. The girls like you. We're over it. Do something
It's like,
else.
yeah, you're a great athlete, but instead of like, it's almost like the Rick Rude gimmick from the 80s, except they're saying he's a good guy now, where it's like, all the women love me and all the guys want to be me.
Yeah. I mean, that was the bottom line of Shawn Michaels' character at the time.
Yeah, but it ends up like, at this point in time, it's more like, that's the asshole jock from high school that made me feel crappy and got life handed to him on a silver platter.
Yep. And you can kind of tell when the two of them come out, the differing reaction. You could tell the guys are cheering for Mick Foley.
Yeah, like, especially because we're in Philly.
The smart fans.
Yeah, the smart fans know that this is Cactus Jack. This is Mick Foley, who had a run in ECW.
Yeah. So you could tell the guys are cheering for Foley / Mankind.
Yeah, and the women are still just going nuts. The women and the children are going nuts over Shawn still.
Yeah.
As expected.
Which kind of reminds you of Cena now. You still have the kids and the women all for Cena, but the smart fans and the guys are like,
No, it's like, no, I don't like this. This reminds me of something I don't like, instead of, it's like, I don't want to be this guy. I know this guy. This guy used to piss me off.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to see. Overall, it was a really good match.
So I like to think that this match was really kind of the start of Shawn going from being super technical babyface into kind of more degenerate asshole heel that we all kind of knew he was. Because, again, mid to late 90s kind of starting up here. This was when Shawn was kind of battling some demons. We have a big old doggo here as a guest, so you might hear the big old doggo just coming running in and thumping into the mic stands.
She's got to know what's going on.
But, yeah, this was kind of a real turning point in Shawn's career, I think, when he starts really... He was the face in the match, but he pulled out some heel stuff near the end when Mankind just wouldn't stay down.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was stomping on Foley's hands. He was trying to break fingers. It worked as a babyface only because it was Philly, I think.
Yeah.
But
anywhere else, it probably wouldn't have gone over as well.
Yeah, it was a much different, a much angrier Shawn Michaels, and the crowd did respond to that. And this is really the character we would see come out when DX originally formed.
Yeah, because he had done a couple of spots where you almost thought that they were actually getting mad at each other, which was kind of a callback to the...
So, yeah, that was a callback to SummerSlam where Shawn Michaels and Vader had their match, and Vader missed a cue, and Shawn just kind of broke character for a second and lost his stuff and swore at Vader and kicked him in the head.
And they actually do a really good job of calling back to that, because I thought it was a legit thing.
Right. So there's a spot in the match where it looks like Mick blows Mick blows his timing. And in response, it looks like they almost just get into a brawl, and it looks like Foley just takes him down with like a rear naked choke almost. And it gets a little confusing, a little messy, but it was actually all planned and it looked amazing.
Yeah. It looked like they were actually going at it. I mean, at one point, Foley just hauls off and smacks the taste out of Shawn's mouth.
Yeah, and it looked like two guys just kind of wrestling in the schoolyard, taking each other down to the ground and just trying to hold someone down and kind of grind them out.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, overall, it was a really good match. There wasn't, again, it's probably not something where I'm going to tell you should go out and seek this match out. I would give it a solid 4.
I'd say if
4
you're
stars.
a big fan of either Shawn Michaels or Mankind or Mick Foley, go seek it out. If you're just not their biggest fans in the world particularly, it's passable, but it was a really cool match to see for its time, and I definitely think it's worth a watch.
Yeah, and especially because it continued on some stories, because, like we said, Vader comes out to try to interfere.
Yeah, and
against
Undertaker
Shawn.
gets involved in it. Sid gets involved in it.
Yep, Undertaker ends up coming out after the matches. Actually, it's
No,
as the match is
the
still
match was
going.
already thrown out.
And yes, because it was right after the match gets thrown out. Shawn's the winner.
Mankind's beating him up, and so Mankind came to the ring in the casket, in a big old casket.
And he tries to put Shawn into the casket.
Yeah, and as soon as he's about to open the casket up to roll Shawn into it, casket pops open, Undertaker's in the casket suddenly out of nowhere.
And proceeds to beat up.
Yeah, and him and Mankind get into it, so.
Which was, it's kind of cool because this was the upswing of the like supernatural Undertaker powers kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a cool effect. So overall, yeah, I definitely loved the match. I loved the character's progression through the match.
Yeah.
And it did definitely kind of mark the switch into the Attitude Era, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things that I kind of noticed, and I know we talked about it a little bit, during the promo beforehand and at points during the match, Shawn seemed very spaced out.
You think so? I don't think he seemed that bad. He was definitely bad. He's definitely dealing with his addiction issues right here. This was prime time for that.
I mean, it was one of those things where his eyes were kind of darting around every now and then, and his speech didn't seem as on point as it was during his time in DX and before this.
Well, I mean, his time in DX was going to be worse than this, so I don't know.
He had some points, but also not nearly as good as it was after he came back from retirement.
Very fair. I mean, overall, excellent match, excellent storyline progression from the match, just a lot of really good stuff here. The card as a whole, not terribly strong.
Overall, it's a forgettable pay-per-view.
Yeah, everything on the undercard really is pretty forgettable, but the main event was pretty notable in an otherwise unnotable card.
Right. So that about does it for In Your House number 10, Mind Games.
All right, we will be right back with a little bit of a bonus on this episode, I think. All right, so before we put the final nail in this episode here, we're actually going to cover one thing in wrestling history that happened. Actually, today's the 19th anniversary of it. The Kennel from Hell match at Unforgiven 1999.
I did not watch this, obviously, when it came out, because, again, I was 8.
Okay, so I was 18 when this came out, and so let me set the stage for this. So Boss Man and Al Snow were having this awful feud that had culminated in Big Boss Man feeding Al Snow his pet chihuahua.
Ugh. Which, as a guy who has a chihuahua, it's just one of those things where it's like, why would you go there with this?
Well, Attitude Era. So, all right, we're going to settle this match. And it's not just going to be Hell in a Cell. We're going to take a steel cage and put it inside Hell in a Cell. Which, if we stop right there, that sounds kind of awesome.
Yeah, I could see. I mean, that's essentially what the Punjabi prison was, except it was just bamboo.
Yeah, not wooden. So, okay, if we left it there, we would have been fine. But we didn't leave it there. We need to bring the dog angle into things. We're going to have German Shepherd attack guard dogs between the cell and the
steel cage.
So there's an old adage in acting, never work with kids or animals. And holy hell, did that apply here?
Yeah, I should go back and watch it again.
No, you shouldn't.
Just because of how bad it is.
So, Boss Man was a fine worker. Al Snow was a decent to good worker.
Yeah.
The restrictions on this match, though, did not work out well. So, in theory, what would happen is as soon as someone made it up and over the cage to the floor, so the ultimate goal was to actually escape from the Hell in a Cell. The door wasn't locked.
Escape everything.
Yeah, just get out of town. The theory was between the cage and the cell were these to attack dogs, and anyone that got between that came down off the cage before they made it out of the cell would be attacked by these dogs. First problem being, if you've ever actually seen a legitimate animal attack, it's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no way we could just use like wild, untrained, frenzied dogs.
yeah.
For many reasons. Like we can't have like
If-
you can't have just rabid dogs, and you can't have the wrestlers exposed to that.
I mean, as soon as somebody drops down into that and that dog is actually frenzied, person is if they don't die, they're gonna be messed up for life.
Right, you'll be maimed.
Right.
Literally, you would get maimed. It'd be horrible.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we're going to use trained dogs that, if you've ever seen, like, whatever random early 2000s kind of reality game show TVs where people have to try to outrun the attack dog while wearing the big padded suit. Basically, a German Shepherd that's going to run, bite your arm, and try to just drag you down to the ground. In theory. Instead, what we got was a dog shitting on television and then the dogs humping each other. These dogs had absolutely no interest in actually attacking any human beings.
Yeah, it was something else.
Yeah, it was just bad. It's something that on paper, if you removed the dogs, it sounds like it would be incredibly cool looking and dangerous.
Yeah, I mean that could have rivaled WCW's War Games. I mean it
Yeah.
could have been something really cool, like a new take on the Hell in a Cell itself.
Right, and this was it was 2 years after Hell in a Cell was first introduced, so it was starting to become a little commonplace, and they were kind of starting to see what other directions we can go besides shoving people off the damn thing.
Right. And again, all they had to do was not have the dogs.
Right, and the dogs absolutely ruined this thing.
It could have been a really, really good match. It could have been, something different to do.
Yeah, it could have been interesting. It could have been a new level of stuff to do. I don't know if these two guys were necessarily the right ones to do it, but so be it. Anyways. So yeah, 19th anniversary of the Kennel from Hell match that just
Ugh.
so not good.
Ugh.
Really not good. All right. Anyways, that's your little bonus content for this episode then. Anything else to cover before we wrap it up here?
I don't think so. I mean, again, overall a forgettable card, but the last two matches were probably the best.
Yeah, and again, I think it's worth checking out that main event just for the kind of character progression between Mankind and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah. So yeah, other than that, there's not really a whole lot going on aside from this and the Kennel from Hell. There was not really anything happening in this week in wrestling history.
No, not a whole ton, but good news is next week we got something else coming up here. So again, thanks to Steve and Jamie for having us over at Missing the Mark last week. That was a really fun show. Go check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, those guys do mostly the recap kind of stuff where they'll look at.
Yeah, they'll do like pay-per-views. They'll check out some like the episode before we were on. They did a look back at the NXT call-ups.
Yeah, so they do a variety of little things, but their main thing is kind of recap shows. So
Yeah.
if you want to get other people's opinions on the shows that are happening, it's a
On
good
the current
place.
product.
Yeah, it's a good place to start.
Definitely. So check out Missing the Mark over there. And then again, if you ever want to follow us on our social media, we are This Week in Wrestling History on Facebook.
We're Wrestle Hist Pod on Twitter.
Yep. And we are Wrestling History Podcast at gmail.com if you want to reach out to us.
Next week and coming up in the future, we're gonna try some stuff a little bit different with more of the independent things. So we might
Yeah.
have some stuff in the works.
And I think we may have some guests on in the coming weeks here, see if we can get some new blood up here in the studio and
Yeah,
get some new takes on things besides just the two of us.
I think we've finally started to hit a stride where we could add a third person in and
Yeah.
throw a monkey wrench into everything.
Sounds like a plan. So, all right. Again, you can check us out on Spotify, on iTunes, on Google Podcasts. Am I missing anything else?
Nope, we're good.
All right. We're history.